everyone. I can see people starting to come into the session, and we're so excited to see you. This is our third virtual and 17th overall Newburyport Literary Festival. My name is Leslie Hendrickson. I'm on the steering committee. Let me introduce Bill Roorbach, whose latest novel, Lucky Turtle, came out this week. Congratulations. Previous books of fiction include The Girl of the Lake, the Kirkus Prize finalist, The Remedy for Love, the best-selling Life Among Giants, and the Flannery O'Connor award-winning collection, Big Bend. His memoir in Nature, Temple Stream, won the Maine Literary Award in nonfiction and is available in a new paperback edition with its companion volumes, Into the Woods and Summers with Juliet. Anne Hood is the author of the best-selling novels, The Book That Matters Most, The Red Thread, The Knitting Circle, and the memoir Kitchen Yarns, Notes on Life, Love, and Food. Her new book, Fly Girl, will be published by W.W. Norton tomorrow.
Yeah.
Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Paris Review, O Magazine, and Real Simple. The recipient of a Best American Travel Writing Award, among other honors. She lives in Providence, Rhode Island. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Hi, Bill. It's so good to see you, old friend.
Hi, Anne. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to talk about Lucky Turtle. I've got the blur setting on. Bill, hold yours up. I've got mine here.
It's very romantical, though.
It's such a great cover. I want everyone to see it and also to recognize it when they go to bookstores.
Yeah, it is a good cover.
I love it.
Yeah. Is
So
that
Bill,
Michael lurking in the blur?
Michael's lurking. My husband, Michael Woolman, is lurking in the blur. I have trouble multitasking, so he's going to help me with the Q&A because when I'm talking, I have trouble looking over here. Wow, I was listening to Leslie introduce you, and like every book she was saying, I'm like, oh, that's my favorite. It's like, oh no, that one's my favorite. Oh no, that one's my favorite, because all of your books are so good. But I think Lucky Turtle is my favorite. So I have to say, Rohrbach fans, you have to go out and get this book, follow those links, or go to your local independent bookstore. And I also got very wistful, Bill, because when I met you, you had just written Summers with Juliet. So that's how long ago we met at Breadloaf.
A long time ago, yeah.
But we're here to talk about Lucky Turtle, and I'm so excited to do that.
It was in the last century.
It was a century ago.
Well, it was in the previous century.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, we fared well. You couldn't tell that was a century ago. So I wrote down a little description of the book, but I thought, why hear me describe it? Tell us what it's about.
Well, I'm starting to have done this enough to get better at it. You know how it's so hard at first, because and then by the end of the tour, you're like, yeah, and then you
one sentence.
Well, it's about a young woman, a girl who gets in trouble in her sort of down at the heel suburban town, and is sent to a reform camp in Montana. And there she meets a guy who turns out to be the love of her life, and her rescuer in so many ways. And off they go. And off goes the book with them to the wilderness. They run away from camp.
You span a long time in this book, right? Decades go by.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's the past stories in the 90s and the present story is now. You know, I kind of aimed it right around pub date. So it's happening right now.
As we speak, the thing is happening that we can't say the spoiler is happening. I love that. I think it was Kirkus who called Lucky the sexiest character around in a long time or something. And indeed he is. He's also so mystical. And he makes these sort of forecasts, and he's so mysterious, but also down to earth. How did you come up with a character like this?
Well, wow, it's a little bit of a story, but when I was in high school, I wasn't a hellion exactly, but I wasn't easy for my folks who had 4 other kids. But anyway, my mother sent me out to Montana to straighten me out. to stay with her little brother for the summer when I was 15, I think. And I was like, oh shit, Jesus summer is about to take place. But instead, he's just the coolest guy. And really, his idea of his ministry was not so much the church, but to go into the town and into the parks and into the, at the time they weren't called homeless, but the hobos and the bums and the derelicts is how they were thought of. Easier to dismiss, and he assigned me to this guy who was my age, not literally assigned me. He was so subtle, he's like, hey, there's this really cool guy that's in town who, I think you could really be a good influence on this kid, And so he takes me down to the park and he points him out and he goes, make friends with him. I'll be back later, and so I was so shy, but and he was quite a figure, and he called himself Kills the Sky, which my uncle constantly told me that's not his real name, but my uncle had known his mother who died of a drug overdose in an era, this is the 60s. I transposed it to the 90s in the novel, but I hadn't heard of someone whose mother died of an overdose, and he was of indeterminate background. You couldn't quite put your finger on. So he styled himself to be a crow, but he was it was a story of difference, and he had because he took on this identity, and also because he was different, his life was one big fight. And because he basically lived out in the streets, one huge battle from start to finish. But if you got some time with him, we'd take these long walks, hike up Mount Helena and stuff like that. He was this philosopher, he is so deep and so different the way he approached, the way his mind worked. Probably it was banged up from so much abuse. So much. His story was it was outrageous, and you could see why he'd want to abandon it to make himself whoever he could be. So one day and we used to talk in front of my uncle, but we talked a lot about, especially he talked about, we could live in the wilderness, we'd be fine. We don't need all this capitalist crap,
Right.
So my uncle goes, yeah, all right. So he takes us sort of by surprise, takes us up. You guys want to spend a couple of weeks together? And I'm like, yeah, wilderness, yeah. So he drives us up to Bob Marshall Wilderness, drops us off, and says, I'll pick you up on the other side. It's 1 million acres. I'll pick you up on the other side at such and such road in 2 weeks.
What?
And there's a line I put in the book. He says, and keep track of the days, because that's the first thing you'll lose. And he gave us each a little pack of fish hooks. He gave us a leader line, fish line, but no poles, just fishing line. 2 of those canteens with the canvas bags around them. Remember those?
Yeah, I do.
They were common. And that's it. We had whatever clothes we were wearing and no food, nothing, just on our way. And the thing is that Kills was so good at this stuff. We had it was Montana, it was high summer. There's no bugs, and it was clear, gorgeous nights. I doubt it rained a single drop, But he could make, he could find food everywhere. I was really good at fishing, so we had to fish every day, and whatever, all these greens and mushrooms, and including ones that got you high, and just all kinds of revelatory chow, Anyway, we made it. We were very proud of ourselves, and my uncle was, pretend amazed, because he knew we could do it. So while I was with Kills in the forest, he was the perfect Kills. He was all philosopher, all deep, all love, this kind of perfection, And as soon as he got back in town, he was back to getting pounded and stuff, and pounding people and getting her. So he would get beat up, and those people, the police wouldn't do anything. But if he did anything, the police he'd be arrested constantly, It's a long story about him. The end of it is that my uncle, we used to write letters back and forth, like once a month or something. I went there 3 summers,
Oh,
but in the years after that. And when I was around maybe 30, he wrote and said, I don't know if you remember this kid so-and-so, using his real name. He was just beaten to death in a fight.
oh, so that was the end for him.
Yeah, and what happened, that nature took, so my second summer there, I hung out with him, but it had gotten more dangerous,
Yeah.
difficult. And the third summer, I just couldn't be with him because everywhere we went, he was trouble. So what I wanted to do was redeem him, just make a character that was the good side of him,
Yeah.
and bring him back to life, so that I
You,
could enjoy him again.
you did that. I think the person you described, Kills, it seems like when you were in the wilderness, he was his best self and his truest self.
Yes.
And you give part of that to Lucky for sure. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was something that I really, and it ties in with what we're talking about, something I really love about you as a writer, but also about you as a person, is your love and knowledge and connection with nature. Everything from gardening to things that grow in the wild to water and aquatic life. And I don't think I've ever been in your company when you haven't pointed out some wonderful surprise in nature, or identified wild fennel or something like in Italy, or time deodorant, Michael said. So and in this book, I felt like Montana and the natural world were actually characters, like you describe them so beautifully and bring them so to life. How did you come to be such so connected to nature? Was it that summer in Montana, or does it go back before that?
Well, first, thank you. It's really important to me, and Michael's reference. Remember, we were walking and
It does.
yeah, there was wild time, and I was like, oh, rubbing it on myself, I think it has to do with my mom, who was a horticulturist without portfolio. But she was the president of New Canaan Nature Center, where I grew up, and it's a job that would have paid, but my dad said, no wife of mine is going to have a paying job, So she did it free, but she was known as the Fern Lady. And I did a reading I did it with Steve Yarborough was there. I just talked to him yesterday by coincidence, but
Yeah.
I did a reading in Alabama at the Hoover Library, that amazing library. And this elderly woman came up afterwards and said, I knew your mother. Your mother and I went to England together for the flower show. She was very well known for her fern. I didn't know, none of us knew anything I didn't even know she went to England.
Oh my gosh.
But so when I was a kid, we'd walk around, every little thing, she'd pick up stuff and say, taste this, what this is, and she'd say the Latin names, and she'd say, let's plant a little of this over here, and she could, I think I've told you this story, but she could lean down anywhere, and pick up a 4-leaf clover. You could spend 20 hours not find one in the same patch, and she go, oh, there's one right there, pink.
Oh wow.
So that's where it comes from. I'm certain of it. And then just because I was a bit of a neglected kid in a way. There were 5 of us, and my dad was a corporate guy, not home a lot. My mother had mental health issues and wasn't available a lot. I spent all my time in the woods. When I was really little, I would just roam through the forest. And I think that's where it all comes from.
Yeah, that's great. And it continued through your life, because sometimes people have that in childhood, but move to a city or move somewhere or move on to other things. But I love how you stay connected to it.
Even when I lived in New York for all those years, I kept a garden on the roof and found all the wild things.
Yeah, that's great. It's one of my favorite parts about you as a person and you as a writer too.
Wow.
I love what Lily King said about Lucky Turtle. She called it a thrilling, blistering tale of young love and old hate.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like so succinct, but also so beautiful. Can you talk about those two things, young love and old hate?
Right on the money.
Yeah.
And so I don't know where I started with the story. I don't recall, you know. As you said, it took a long time. Part of it is I got hurt right in the middle of making
Oh,
it.
did you? Yeah.
So I lost a couple of years, you know, of working because I couldn't read for a couple of years. But anyway, it's like a love story, a love story of difference. I don't know a way to say it, but
Yeah.
that the cultural, the weight of the cultural hate on this kid is so great that you can't just simply fall in love and have a love story. You know, she couldn't. Sindra, who's my narrator, falls in love with him. I think part of why I had a female narrator is so that they could fall in love, and not that I didn't want to write Brokeback Mountain again, partly
Right.
because it wouldn't be very authentic, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so I let her stand in for me a little, and I let her have the full connection with a guy like Kills that I could never have. But a guy not like Kills because he doesn't have the deep dark side. He's emerged from his trauma peacefully. I don't, you know, that's the nature of Lucky. It's
Yeah.
not her nature, but he tries to bring that to her, you know.
Right.
I guess that's it. And I remember walking down the street with that guy and just realizing that he put up with so much that I never had to think about, you know, like, I mean, people yelling at him everywhere we went, strangers, people he knew too, which is worse, and cops would just pull up slowly and go, get the fuck off the street, you know.
Wow.
And are you Bill's nephew? My uncle Bill, are you Bill's nephew? You better get away from that guy, you know. Why are you hanging out with, you know, and then the most slur words you could. And that was the people who were supposed to be protecting him, you know.
Was he your age, Bill?
Exactly, yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
slightly older.
Well, you've opened up something that I wanted to talk to you about, but I do want to remind everybody who's listening and tuning in to put your questions in the Q&A, and we're going to turn to those in 10 minutes or 5 minutes or so. But you acknowledge their differences just now. And in your acknowledgments in your book, you thank your sensitivity readers. And you and I have had a lot of conversations about what that is and how that worked and what it does. You have characters in this book. I'm probably leaving out some. It's so multicultural, you know, which is another thing I really loved. Is obviously Lucky, the Native American. I believe isn't Sindra's boyfriend Dag Puerto Rican, if I'm remembering correctly.
Puerto Rican, yeah.
Yeah.
Afro-Caribbean, he would call himself.
Afro-Caribbean, Haitian, Chinese. I mean, I'm probably leaving it so multicultural. And we're living in a time when that can be there's a discussion going on about how we represent ourselves and others. And therefore you had the sensitivity readings, but can you talk about what that was? And it worked because people have lauded you for how well you wrote this book and how sensitive it is.
Well, of course, we write as allies, start there, but that's not quite good enough. And I kept having this doubt as I was making it, like, is this really my story to tell, you know? So I'm like, in which way, how can it, and you know, that's our lives now, right? I mean, all through my life, I don't know, as a professor, as a musician, as a, you know, roommate, just people living in New York City, just my life, to tell my life, it wouldn't be right if I didn't include pretty much every possible kind of person in all the different categories: size, shape, background, race, all the things, you know. So it didn't seem unnatural to me, but you know, and a couple of my early readers were friends. A friend who's from China. I asked her to read some, and she was like, she's like, I don't understand the question, you know. what is the question? I'm just trying to see if you find anything objectionable about me. And she's like, I don't understand. I just can't understand what you're talking about.
So interesting.
Whereas all my American friends were like, they knew what I was talking about. So I think, yeah, and China's apparently a pretty racist place too, you know. So, in fact, the whole entire world, I think, there's the group you look down on, and the group that does the work, and the group that lords it over them. Yeah. So the sensitivity readings were unofficial. I had a lot of friends read it, got a lot of great ideas, a lot of just like, you know, I'm not sure she would say that, just helpful like that, you know. And but then the official ones were helpful. And one of them was particularly spectacularly helpful, was a Black woman. She calls herself, and she is a novelist, and she approached it as a novel. So the first page of her long letter was, I love this novel. Here's what I like about it. And then she gets to the end of that and goes, but I'm here as a sensitivity reader, aware of my job, which is to tell you what it was like to read this book as a Black woman. And well, for one thing, you have a lot of Black characters, and I really, really appreciated that and loved it. And they're all individual, they're all different. So I appreciate that. But as a Black woman, there were 10 or 12 things in this book that really made me feel uncomfortable. That's the worst I could say, uncomfortable. You don't have to change them because I get uncomfortable, but I just think you ought to know about them, and then you can decide whether it's something you want to change or not. Just so gentle. Like there wasn't a sec, she didn't get my hackles up, which was a gift of hers. She's a great teacher and a great editor, I think. She's a writer, but I went through, and it was all carefully marked, and it wasn't just like marked, it was like on page X, you know, page 82, whatever, you have characters say this, this, and this. And the reason I felt uncomfortable there, and she explains why and then tells a story from her own life that to help illustrate why that's uncomfortable, fully aware that I might not have lens to get this, you know. And it taught me so much. And I went, and all of them I went and worked on and fixed, you know. And the way they got fixed is that I understood something I hadn't understood before, and my characters became better characters, and the book became a better book.
What a gift. I mean, that woman alone, what a gift.
That woman alone, and then all of them, and some of them were more confrontational, but that's also a gift, because you say, and some of them were just wrong. They'd say things that just seem wrong, and I'd be like, well, but I left it so someone could read it that way. So I need to respond to this by working on the writing so that it can't be misread in that particular way, you know. Because it's so important that we get to talk about our lives, you know.
And everything that entails, everything that encompasses.
And this guy, I mean, my kills, who isn't lucky, but he's a huge influence on me. So how could I get through a whole career and not write about him?
Right.
Yeah. So that's not an easy answer, and I know that it's all easy for me to say, you know, and I appreciate the pain that people go through, and don't want to cause that pain if I can help it. But no doubt here and there I will, and I'm sorry for that. But I also want to be able to write as I write, and
well, I think you did it beautifully with the help of so many people, and with your own big heart, you know. I have a question that's kind of a writerly question, but we have so many that I'm going to hold off and turn our attention to the audience. And I see so many people, like I see Deborah Spark up here with a question, and so many people that we know. Hi, Deborah. You probably know some that I don't, but I recognized her name. So my assistant is here to read the questions for us.
We were talking about who's read the book. There was a question, did you share, you have a writers group, which I'm interested in. generally, did you share this book with your writers group?
Yes, this book was one of the founding projects of the group.
Oh, really?
Those poor people read it like multiple drafts of this thing. And then they brought me through getting injured and trying to come back to it. And, the world had changed in those couple of years in a way that the book had to change. So that was interesting. The writing group is, there's 5 of us. And one day we realized, I said to Monica Woodson, I go, Monica, you know what? We were talking about having more people, and Monica goes, no, 5 is just right. And I go, aren't you one of 5 kids? And I yes, I said, so am I. And it feels just right. And then, the third person goes, well, I'm sorry to blow this up, but there's only 3 of us, unless you count my step siblings, then it's 5. And then it turned out all 5 of us are from families of 5. It's the freakiest thing. And it has this comfort, and it is an intentional family. It's like, instead of having like, my mom would say stuff. I'd say, I finished a new book. She'd go, am I in it? No, don't worry. Well, that's fine.
My mother always thought she was, even if she wasn't. I know that woman's mate. No, that woman is not you, Mom. That's not you. I really like Deborah Spark. Oh, what did you have?
The first question that came in was
Carrie, from Carrie.
Writing from a teenage female point of view. How was that?
How was writing from a female teenage point of view? Sindra is 16, I think, right? In the past story.
As it opens, but the voice is a grown woman who's remembering. She's remembering from somewhere around now, and then the last part of the book takes place somewhere around now.
Yeah.
So but writing from her point of view was, I don't know. It was problematical at times, but I thought mostly just human experience works, and then add what I know about, I should say what little I know about women, just from having so many deep friendships and relationships and with women. I mean, from all different sorts of relationships, friends, sisters, mothers, aunt, my wife, all the possible. And so much of what happens to Sindra are just little echoes of things someone told me, or the way women have to walk through the world. It's not quite as severe as what Kills went through, but I know that it's different for a woman to get in the dark elevator at a parking garage than it is for me.
Right.
I know that. So that's the only, but mostly it's just the same thing. Being in love I don't think it feels that much different. And all those sex organs are made out of the same cells, just dividing a different way. It's got to feel exactly the same, is my impression, but I'm sure I'm wrong.
Deborah Spark asks about fiction versus nonfiction. You told a great story beginning this discussion. You wrote a beautiful memoir called Summers with Juliet, which is probably my favorite book of yours. When does, Deborah Spark asks, when does a story move into fiction or into nonfiction?
How do you decide?
How you decide? Yeah, it says, when is a story headed for fiction, and when for nonfiction for you? Since I could see easily you were writing that story you just told about the man you met in Montana as an essay. So what makes a story want to go in one direction or the other for you?
That's a good example. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I never have any question. It's like, this is fiction, and not only that, this is a novel versus a story. That just starts. That's from the very first conception. And this is nonfiction. This is an essay, a true story, let's say. Even if I might exaggerate in the true story, or even if I might borrow the truth in the fictional story, they're just so different. You know? So if I were to write about Kills, I would start right out with a bad deficit, which is I don't remember things that clearly. I could do it, I could do, had to be pretty sure. And I don't know how yeah, and then that's when I think I start getting into, I don't know, I can't, this is a complex, Deborah, this is a hard question. I'm not gonna-
Deborah, I love this question.
I'm not gonna flunk.
Bill, I agree with you. I never think, should I write this as fiction or nonfiction? It just presents itself. And I always find this a hard question to answer. So I was curious about what you were going to say, but you kind of articulated exactly what I feel as someone who writes both as well.
You're right, yeah.
You know, I've been asked already in some interviews, why didn't I write Sky Girl as nonfiction? And I'm like, because it would have read like Coffee, Tea, or Me. I mean, why didn't I write it as fiction?
Yeah, I heard you.
And it never occurred to me to do that. So it just is what it is. I don't know. That's about
Like writing about like me and kills at that age, I think I've done it a little bit, but it would come out, I think it would not per force come out vainglorious, you know.
Yeah.
Like, look at us, aren't we cool, kind of. But whereas with the characters, you can do all the, and to go into all of his troubles and stuff. I don't know how to do it, and I don't know what happened to him really, you know. Anyway, but yeah, so they're very different. I have different purposes. So when I'm doing nonfiction, I have okay. You know Joni Mitchell, the fabulous musician, bless her heart. She's ailing now. She's like 75. She is also a painter, and a good painter. And she says, someone asked her once, how do you balance painting and music? Does it come from the same well? And she said, well, I sing my sorrow and I paint my joy. So for me, it's like I fiction my sorrow and I non-fiction my joy.
Wow.
But except this novel, I think I finally got to the joy at, in a way at the end, and it could have gone either way. But in these times, I had a much darker ending for a long time.
Did you?
And yeah, and in these times, I just felt like, how could I do that to people and to myself? Really, it was too hard, too painful even to write it. So I switched gears, and that's the beauty of the fiction. With the nonfiction, I'm stuck with the fact that my beautiful friend was beaten to death because he was different, and that's how it's going to have to end no matter what.
Yeah.
This one, I'm able to free myself of that horror.
Yeah. And give us such like a hopeful, I shouldn't say too much because I think the ending is sort of a spoiler if we say too much.
Okay, we won't say anymore. I had Remedy for Love was on one of these sites where they appropriate the whole thing except for like 20 pages, so they don't infringe.
Really?
But they left off the last 20 pages, and then all the Amazon reviews were like, it's such an abrupt end. I want to know.
That's really funny.
So that's what I'm doing. I'm just going to cut it off at a certain page number.
Bill, we have a couple more questions, but I have to put my 2 cents in for something that you said, which is a few times in this 40 minutes or so that we've been together, you've said it used to be this, and then this happened. How many drafts of this book do you think you wrote? I'm curious because I know there's people in the audience who are in the middle of that process, and sometimes they're like, but I've done 2 drafts, and I'm just picking up that this has gone through a lot.
Like Remedy for Love was, I don't know, 3 or 4 drafts. Bang, bang. The story was so compact, took place in a short time period. This is a complicated story. Plus, I got hurt and it had to change trajectory completely because the world had changed trajectory.
Yeah.
So there's that. But so in my files in my computer, I have the first file is called, when I first started to coalesce into something, I called the first coalesced file. The very first files are like Montana novel or something,
Right.
The first real coalesced one is called Lucky 1, Lucky 2, Lucky 3, up to Lucky 19.
Wow.
And they're wildly different, And then I got hurt. And so after getting hurt, I came back to it. and it was lucky. I don't know. I got up to like 27 or something, and then I got tired of it. So I'm like, okay, and this one I'm calling Lucky Final. And it was Lucky Final, and then there's Lucky Final 2, Lucky Final 3, Lucky Final 4, and then Lucky Edited 1, Lucky Edited. My editor like had some great ideas. So
That's really funny. So there, we have a question from anonymous attendee. What does it say,
It
Michael?
says, this is more of what you were just saying. What keeps you going as a writer?
Oh.
What keeps you from saying, okay, I've done enough, time to lie low? And as a selfish reader, please keep going.
I love that.
well, you know, people are I've seen several people retire, you know, like Don Winslow announced that he's retiring from writing, which that's not in my retiring from being a professor. That made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
In 2009, I stopped. I quit. You know, no more. But I'm never gonna. How can I'm not sure I could do that. What keeps me going? I don't really know. It's something about. I don't know. That's a compulsion. It's like, and I get more. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I think it's a kind of optimism, a sense that there's some need for it, a sense that with a book about a beautiful relationship of difference, I can make a difference or bring some understanding to at least myself, if not anyone else. You know, just maybe that's it. Maybe I can experience some of the things that I loved experiencing when I was younger. I can re-experience them to some degree. That's a driver. Maybe I can experience things I never got to experience. That's a driver, like being a lover to Lucky, like Sindra gets to be.
Yeah.
So in a way, I get to experience that by writing it. You know, I'm a daydreamer. I love living in my brain, and I love being inside a novel probably more than anything.
Yeah.
That I'm either reading or writing.
Yeah.
A great novel. My mom used to say, I buy the fattest books because I don't want them to end.
Oh, Bill, what about, you're writing all these drafts of Lucky Turtle, this wonderful novel that's just come out. It's so good that everyone has to read. But you're in draft 17 or whatever. Do you question, and I'm wondering if this is what anonymous attendee was sort of getting at, like, I can't do this one anymore. Like, do you ever feel like I can't fix it, or I don't want to fix it, or I'm too frustrated, or how do you decide I've got to save this, or I can make this work?
I had some discouraging times with this novel for sure. Part of them to do with my injury, and then another part of them to do with the representation discussion.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't do this. Well, who do I think I am? That was discouraging. And just beyond that, it's a complicated time game with this novel. So that was hard. And
Yeah.
I think that it was hard was in a way part of the fun and the reward as you fix stuff. And I've gotten old enough and written enough books like you that now I actually have the confidence that this chaos is going to work out.
Right.
And that's a huge part of being a writer, is knowing that it's going to be okay. And you can't, when you're starting out, it's kind of hard to know that. I mean,
Right.
because a lot of times it's not going to be okay. I did let go of 2 or 3 novels, apprentice novels,
Right.
in high school through college and a little beyond, that they had some qualities, enough, the last one enough to get an agent and stuff. It just never sold. That one, little shreds of the themes I realize I keep writing the same book in some ways, you know.
Yeah.
And that one took place in Montana, by the way. So
I remember Tim O'Brien saying a writer doesn't write A and then G and then Y and then F. They write A and A and A, trying to get it right. And I think that speaks to themes. You know, we have our themes that we return to. And I have felt, and I think you're saying this as well, that after being a writer for this long, the challenges are actually fun. Like when I think I can't fix it, that's kind of the fun of it.
Yeah.
But of course, when you're starting out, that could defeat you unless you have such confidence or faith, right?
Faith, or again, driven by some
Yeah.
hidden compulsion, it's like the world's biggest Wordle puzzle.
Today's was hard. We had a little trouble with it this morning.
I haven't
We have a
done it.
question from, is that Betsy?
Betsy Westendorf.
Betsy Westendorf.
Would you ever consider writing an article essay about the sensitivity reactions you got so others could share your learnings?
Huh.
I was so fascinated by your comment that your characters became better and stronger through the readings. Would you consider writing nonfiction about this issue?
I don't think it's mine to write about, but I could see doing a group thing with, I would love to, who ought to write it is the woman who gave me my best reading, and that's who ought to write it, because boy, was she brilliant. I could see doing it with her. I could see doing a podcast with her and trying to really get to some of what's moving this discussion. It's a very important discussion. It's so important, but it's so nuanced and it's so much more complicated than the knee-jerk stuff. We have to be so.
The idea of a podcast on the topic, and I know there are literary podcasts. I wonder if they've done anything, or if they would, because I find it so informative and necessary. And your description and benefit of it is I think really important for writers to hear. I think we have one more question. Fran Ziegler.
From Fran Ziegler. Such a beautiful tribute to your friend. Is there any chance he has relatives that will come across this novel?
No, I don't think so. He had a wife. Not a wife. He had a girlfriend. He had a baby. I knew him. He was 16. He had a 2-year-old baby, and the girl the girl might have been 14. I don't know. It's real. Where is she? No clue. No clue. I know that things were bad for her. I know that their apartment that my uncle got them, and the church members paid rent for these kids, trying to bring them out of the fires. But I know that the apartment was broken into, and when he was, I don't know, it's a long story, but I don't know. I think she might be dead too.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
I'm pretty sure, but my uncle was sort of elusive about things like that. So I think something really terrible happened.
Wow. That's not a nice note to end on. It's how sad, but it was the reality of Kill's life, right? And
it's not the reality of, it is the reality of Lucky's life, but luckily Lucky has Sindra and vice versa.
Yeah.
They both avoid severe fates that some real people can't avoid.
They are both such memorable characters, but hearing how you came up with Lucky, I'm glad that this version of Kills is on the page now, and that he's such a gentle, and as I said, he's magical, I felt, and I'm so glad to have you, that you wrote this and that we all get to read it, Bill.
So the note I want to end on is, Anne, I love you so much. It's so good. Michael, so good to see you guys.
I love you too, Bill. I can't wait to see you in person, not in a rectangle. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Newburyport Literary Festival and Leslie for being here.
Thank you both. This was so interesting. And we're all running out to get both Fly Girl and Lucky Turtle if we haven't gotten them already. Thank you again, Anne and Bill.
Thank you. Bye, Bill. Bye, Leslie.
Bye. See you
Thank
guys.
you, Michael, for helping.
For helping.